After seeing almost 1,000 homes in San Diego, there's some out there you need to be very careful with. So if you don't want to waste 20, 50, or hundreds of thousands of dollars on the wrong house, then make sure you keep watching. By the way, my name's Nenad, and I get people just like you reaching out to me every week. So if you're thinking about buying, or even if you're just planning ahead, I'm happy to be a resource for you. I put all my contact info down below, and you can reach out anytime. All right, so the first type of house I want to talk about are flips. Now, I'm not saying you need to stay away from them completely, because we honestly have some really great builders in San Diego, but some investors are cutting way too many corners. Now, a lot of these guys just want to maximize their profits, and some of these investors don't have any construction experience. But the scary thing is that most buyers won't notice some really obvious flaws. So bad tile work, cheap materials, leaking fixtures, these are all signs of extremely poor quality. And this is all stuff that's right in front of us, so just imagine what's going on behind the walls. And you know, a lot of times these flippers aren't using licensed contractors, and you're not getting a warranty on any of the work. So it's super important that we find out who the contractor was, and they should have a list of all the repairs. Also, definitely look into when they bought the property and what they paid, because if everything was slapped together in just a few weeks, the quality is probably not there. They also ask for a huge premium, and sometimes they only invest $50,000 and increase the price by a few $100,000. But let's say you're absolutely set on buying a flip, then make sure you get a proper home inspection. I can't tell you how many times they find hidden leaks, bad electrical wiring, drainage issues, and you really wouldn't know unless there's a professional looking at it. So inspections are an absolute must, because once you close escrow, it all falls on you. But I will say that some flippers actually do really great work. A lot of them have their own crews and contractors, and you can really see a difference in the quality. And some companies even win awards, and they have lots of experience, so just make sure you're doing your homework. Hey guys, if you could just like the video and make sure you subscribe, it really helps the channel grow, and I can make more videos just like this one. Alright, so next you want to avoid homes that are next to a freeway, an airport, or if they're on a very busy street. Now, every time I'm showing one of these, the number one complaint I get is the noise. And the house almost always sells for less than what the comps are showing, especially in higher end neighborhoods. Also, families with kids or pets almost always skip busy streets. It's just too much of a safety issue. So make sure that if you're buying one of these, you're getting a significant discount. Now, most appraisers say around a 10% adjustment. So if the comps are showing 2 million, then you're probably looking at about 1.8. So never pay full price. But even if the noise doesn't bother you, if you ever want to sell, you're going to have way less buyers, and it's probably going to take a lot longer to sell. So just know what you're getting yourself into. Now, here's a super important tip I give to all my buyers. So make sure you drive by the house at different times of the day and even late at night, because you might notice something you didn't see before. Look out for headlights shining into the house, or if there's a school nearby, see what the traffic's like in the morning and in the afternoon. So definitely keep that in mind, but I've got a bunch of other tips for buyers, and just let me know if you need some help. All right, now let's talk about homes with structure issues. And I'm not talking about cosmetic stuff like paint and flooring. This is foundation cracks, uneven floors, excessive water damage. Things are going to cost you a lot of money to fix. Now, the biggest one's going to be foundation issues, and personally, I would never buy this kind of house. It'll cost you tens of thousands of dollars to repair, and it's just not something you want to deal with. So when I'm walking a property, I'm looking for signs of shifting. So this can be cracks in the walls, big gaps around windows and doors, and sloping floors. And I do this every day, so it's really easy to see something's off, but an average person won't even know what to look for. All right, so another tricky one's the roof, and this one's definitely not as bad as a cracked foundation, so I wouldn't stay away from these completely. Now, most homes in San Diego usually have a few small issues with the roof, so I'm not really worried about those, but I'm talking about needing a brand new roof. Now again, I might not completely walk away, but I'm definitely not paying full price, and this is when you need an agent who knows how to negotiate. Now, there's a few different ways to go about this, so we're either asking for a price reduction, credits for closing costs, or maybe even getting the seller to fix it. Now, I think most sellers know when they have a bad roof, and they're just hoping we don't push back on it. All right, now what about properties that have a lot of deferred maintenance? Well, again, you should be getting a discount on it, because a lot of times the work looks manageable, but the cost can add up fast. Now, some of the big ones are the windows, the HVAC system, plumbing and electrical, anything that's going to cost thousands of dollars. But if the seller's discounting the price or giving you credits, then it might actually make sense to buy it. Okay, so let's talk about HOAs. Now, most people just think about the extra monthly payment, but what's more important is how the HOAs run. Now, the first red flag is underfunded reserves. Basically, every HOA has funds set aside for big expenses, so roof repairs, street work, painting, and they use the reserves to pay for these. But if the reserves can't cover the expenses, then the money has to come from somewhere. So now what the HOA is going to do is they're going to add an extra fee on top of your monthly dues, and this is called a special assessment. And unfortunately, there's nothing you can do to get out of paying. Now, we have a ton of of older buildings in San Diego, and I'm seeing more and more of these special assessments. All right, now another red flag is if there's a pending lawsuit against the HOA, because some lenders won't even touch these properties. Legal fees can drain the HOA reserves, and that means your monthly HOA fees are gonna go up. So that's definitely a big one to look out for. Now, one thing I get asked about all the time is short-term rentals, and most HOAs are just not gonna allow them at all. Now, I'm not saying it's impossible to find an HOA that does allow them, but I'd say 80 to 90% want at least a 30-day rental period. And I've seen some HOAs that require a 1-year minimum. So if your main goal is to do short-term rentals, then you want to avoid HOAs. And that's why going over all the documents is extremely important. So don't just glance over them, make sure you read them completely. I'm talking about budgets, reserve studies, rules and regulations. These are going to tell you exactly what you're getting into. Pay attention to things like parking, pets, renovations, rental restrictions, because you don't want to buy a house thinking you could do something and then later you find out that you can't. So again, HOAs aren't necessarily bad, and there's some good ones out there, but if you end up in a bad one, you're gonna wish you never bought the place. Okay, so another house you want to avoid is one that has a huge easement running through it. And if you don't know what that is, it's basically when another person or a company has the right to use your land. So basically you own the land, but you don't have full control over it. Now, it's pretty common for utility companies to have an easement to your property, but most of the time it's along the edges or on a small part of your front yard. And these are all over the place in San Diego, so I wouldn't worry about these kind of easements. But what you really want to avoid is one that takes up a big part of your property, because the biggest problem is you can't build on top of the easement. So no home additions, no pools or guest houses, and now you're super limited with what you can do. Now, if you're buying a big piece of property, then it's probably not a deal breaker, but if it's a smaller lot size, then you definitely want to avoid it. And even if you're okay with it, most buyers aren't, and you'll probably have to sell for less than what the comps are showing. So when you're buying a house, it's super important that you get a map of all the easements, and that way you'll see exactly where they are. All right, so the last house you really want to think twice about is one with an outdated floor plan. And I'm not talking about cabinets or old flooring. That stuff's all pretty easy to switch out. What I'm talking about is the overall layout. So where the bedrooms are, how the kitchen's set up, how big are the bathrooms. You should be thinking about all these things. And one thing that I'd completely stay away from are any awkward stairs. Now, I see this all the time. They're in the middle of the living room, they cut the house in half, or they're just really steep. So even if you remodel everything else, the house is still gonna feel awkward. Now, another big one's a closed off kitchen, because everyone nowadays wants an open concept, and if you can't make that happen, then you're probably wasting your money. Also, the shape of your lot's really important. So if it's pie shaped, if it's sloped in any weird way, or if your backyard's not very usable, that's gonna be a permanent issue. And people in San Diego care a lot about their outdoor space. So if the neighbors all have flat rectangular lots and yours doesn't, then I'd probably stay away from it. Also, power lines are a huge deal breaker for most buyers. So if you see them in the backyard, that's another problem you can't fix. For example, there's a house in Carlsbad where they did such a great remodel on the inside, but there's power lines in the backyard, and it's been on the market for almost a year now. And that's a very long time for a house in San Diego. So always look out for things you can't get rid of. All right, guys, hopefully you got a lot of information out of this video, but if you have any questions, just give me a call or send me a text or an email. And if you're thinking of moving to San Diego, I'm happy to be a resource for you. I know it's definitely hard going through all this stuff by yourself, so I can help guide you in the right direction. And even if you're not moving right now, it's never too early to start planning. Some of my clients even start years in advance, so reach out and let's put a game plan together. All my information's down below. And make sure you watch some of my other videos, or maybe just check this one out up here. They're all super helpful and packed with all kinds of information. All right, guys, I'll catch you in the next one.